Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dr. Victor Cha, Director of Asian Studies Program, School of Foreign Service, Dr. Robert Groves, Provost of Georgetown University, and Ambassador Susan Rice, Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs.
Good afternoon. Thank you, all of you, for joining us here in Gaston Hall for today's lecture on a very timely topic, the future of Asia in America, by one of our most distinguished public servants, the Honorable Susan Rice. Ambassador Rice, we are honored to have you with us today and look forward to your address shortly. I'd like to begin by thanking all the members of the Diplomatic Corps, the community who are joining us today, as well as the members of our community who help make this event possible, especially Dean Carol Lancaster and the School of Foreign Service, Professor Victor Cha in the Asian Studies program, and all of our students with the Georgetown Lecture Fund. Thank you all. There is no region of the world today that figures more into our nation's future than Asia. Its economic and political influence is becoming more deeply felt around the globe. It is home to almost half the world's population, produces much of the world's consumer goods, and contains some of the world's most ancient and enduring civilizations, as well as its vibrant democracies. The Obama administration's so-called pivot, or rebalance to Asia, fully recognizes this region's importance, and we, too, at Georgetown, recognize that importance. We are proud, for example, to have a U.S. Department of Education Title VI Center for East Asia, the only national resource center for East Asia in the nation's capital. Under the directorship of Professor Cha, our thriving undergraduate and graduate programs are training our next generation of leaders in U.S.-Asia relations. In fact, almost half of our eligible Master's in Asian Studies students this past summer interned at the State Department, the Commerce Department, or other postings throughout Asia. It is therefore within this context that we are honored to welcome Ambassador Rice here today, and that we look forward to all that she will share with us. By way of introduction, Ambassador Rice received her Master's and Doctorate of Philosophy and International Relations from New College at Oxford, where she was a Rhodes Scholar, and she has a long record of public service. She has held several positions within the Clinton administration, and in 2000 was awarded the White House's Samuel Nelson Drew Memorial Award for distinguished contributions to the formation of peaceful, cooperative relationships between states. From 2002 to 2009, she was a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, where she focused on U.S. foreign policy, transnational security threats, weak states, global poverty, and development. During President Obama's first presidential campaign, she served as senior advisor for national security affairs, then as a member of the advisory board to the Obama-Biden transition team, and served as co-chair of its policy working group on national security. From January 2009 to this past July, as you know, she served as the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, where she worked to advance U.S. interests, defend universal values, strengthen the world's common security and prosperity, and promote respect for human rights. In that role, For nearly 4.5 years, she was one of the longest-serving U.S. ambassadors to the UN ever. The very same day she left that position, she assumed her current role as National Security Advisor to the President, the office from which she addresses us today. It is my deep pleasure and privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Susan Rice.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Professor Grove. Thank you, Victor, as well, for all your exceptional work to advance American policy towards Asia, from your time on the NSC staff to your current contributions as Director of the Asia Studies Program at the School of Foreign Service. Let me just begin by apologizing a little bit if I sound a bit hoarse. I will do my very best to sustain my voice through the course of what is not a short speech. With luck, I will get there, but forgive me in advance. I also want to thank President DeGioia and my former colleague, Dean Carol Lancaster, for their contributions, along with Professor Cha and Professor Grove, to making it possible for me to speak here today, but most importantly, for Georgetown's unrivaled success in preparing America's future leaders, particularly so many of our policymakers. President Obama is deeply committed to leaving our world more stable, more secure, more free, and more prosperous for generations to come. Those of you who are students here today are uniquely poised to seize the transformative potential of tomorrow across our rapidly changing world. And nowhere are the challenges and the opportunities we face so great as in the Asia-Pacific region. 2 years ago, in laying out his vision for America's role in the region, President Obama said, and I quote, "Asia will largely define whether the century ahead will be marked by conflict or cooperation, needless suffering or human progress." Thus, rebalancing toward the Asia-Pacific remains a cornerstone of the Obama administration's foreign policy. No matter how many hotspots emerge elsewhere, we will continue to deepen our enduring commitment to this critical region. Our friends in Asia deserve and will continue to get our highest level attention. Secretary of State John Kerry has traveled to the region several times and will return again in just a few weeks. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker and U.S. Trade Representative Mike Froman led important U.S. delegations there last month. Vice President Joe Biden will visit China, Japan, and South Korea in early December. And although we were all disappointed that the government shutdown compelled President Obama to cancel his trip to Asia in October, I'm pleased to announce today that President Obama will return to Asia this coming April to continue strengthening our ties across the region. I'd like to take this opportunity to outline what we aim to achieve in the Asia-Pacific in the next 3 years. Ultimately, America's purpose is to establish a more stable security environment in Asia, an open and transparent economic environment, and a liberal political environment that respects the universal rights and freedoms of all. Achieving that future will necessarily be the sustained work of successive administrations. In the near term, President Obama will continue to lay the critical foundations for lasting progress in 4 key areas: enhancing security, expanding prosperity, fostering democratic values, and advancing human dignity. Let me begin with security, which is the underpinning of all progress in every region. We are making the Asia-Pacific more secure with American alliances and an American force posture that are being modernized to meet the challenges of our time. By 2020, 60% of our fleet will be based in the Pacific, and our Pacific Command will gain more of our most cutting-edge capabilities. As we're seeing in the Philippines today, our military presence in the region is vital, not only to deter threats and defend allies, but also to provide speedy humanitarian assistance and unmatched disaster response. We're updating and diversifying our security relationships in the region to address emerging challenges as effectively as we deter conventional threats. We're urging our allies and partners to take greater responsibility for defending our common interests and values. By next year, we will complete the first fundamental revision of our bilateral defense guidelines with Japan in more than 15 years. Japan is also creating its first ever National Security Council, and I look forward to working closely with my Japanese counterpart on regional and global challenges. In South Korea, we're enhancing the alliance's military capabilities to ensure that our combined forces can deter and fully answer North Korea's provocations. With Australia, we're bringing our militaries closer by rotating Marines through Darwin and deepening cooperation in newer areas like missile defense and space and cybersecurity. And we're doing more with Thailand and the Philippines to address maritime security and disaster response. To diversify the network of security relationships in the region, we're strengthening trilateral cooperation with our allies and security partners and encouraging them to cooperate more closely among themselves. When it comes to China, we seek to operationalize a new model of major power relations. That means managing inevitable competition while forging deeper cooperation on issues where our interests converge, in Asia and beyond. We both seek the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, a peaceful resolution to the Iranian nuclear crisis, a stable and secure Afghanistan, and an end to conflict in the Sudans. There are opportunities for us to take concerted action to bolster peace and development in places like sub-Saharan Africa, where sustainable growth would deliver lasting benefit to the peoples of Africa as well as to both our countries. We're improving the quality of our military-to-military relationship with China as we enhance our strategic security dialogues and cooperate on issues like counter-piracy and maritime security. Greater military engagement and transparency can help us manage the realities of mistrust and competition while augmenting the high-level communication that has been a hallmark of this administration's approach to China. As we diversify the ways in which we do business with China, we will continue to champion respect for the rule of law, human rights, religious freedom, and democratic principles. These are the common aspirations that all people share. And we will do this even and especially when it is not the easy or expedient thing to do. I sat on the Security Council at the United Nations with China for over 4.5 years, working on many of these issues. I know all too well that we have some fundamental differences that cannot be minimized. But I also know that our interests on many of the major challenges of our time can and should be more closely aligned. Nowhere is this more evident than in confronting the threat that North Korea poses to international peace and security. The regime threatens its neighbors. Pyongyang proliferates dangerous goods and technologies. It seeks to expand its nuclear weapons arsenal and its long-range missile program in flagrant violation of international law. Consequently, one of our most pressing security goals is to roll back the threat posed by North Korea's nuclear and other WMD programs. To that end, we are prepared for negotiations, provided that they are authentic and credible, get at the entirety of North Korea's nuclear program, and result in concrete and irreversible steps towards denuclearization. Pyongyang's attempts to engage in dialogue while keeping critical elements of its weapons program running are not acceptable, and they will not succeed. We will continue to join with international partners, especially China, to increase pressure on North Korea to denuclearize. We will do what is necessary to defend ourselves and our allies against any threat from North Korea, and will maintain and expand as necessary both national and multilateral sanctions against North Korea. There will continue to be significant costs for future provocations. So Pyongyang has a choice. On the one hand lies greater isolation and crippling economic privation. On the other, a true chance for peace, development, and global integration. Another growing threat to regional peace and security and to U.S. interests is the rise of maritime disputes in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. We aim to help governments in the region to communicate better with one another so that incidents at sea do not unintentionally spark wider conflicts. We encourage all parties to reject coercion and aggression and to pursue their claims in accordance with international law and norms through the establishment of peaceful diplomatic processes for preventing maritime conflicts. A good first step would be progress on a code of conduct for the South China Sea. How the nations and institutions of the Asia-Pacific manage these disputes will be a harbinger of their ability to shape their shared security future. Indeed, many of Asia's most vexing security challenges are transnational security threats, those that transcend borders, like climate change, piracy, infectious disease, transnational crime, cyber theft, and the modern-day slavery of human trafficking. No one nation can meet these challenges alone. That is in part why we are increasing our engagement with regional institutions like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and the East Asia Summit. These groups allow nations to develop ideas, share best practices, address disputes constructively, and nurture a sense of shared responsibility. Asia's regional institutions are essential to delivering more effective solutions than any one nation can muster on its own. These security goals constitute one key element of our Asia-Pacific strategy. Yet, we have an equally essential economic agenda in the region. By the end of 2016, we aim to transform our economic relations with the region through dramatically increased U.S. exports, the implementation of the most ambitious American free trade agreement in decades, and closer cooperation with China, India, and other emerging economies in pursuit of sustained global growth. Our own economic future is inextricably linked to that of the Asia-Pacific. A full quarter of the goods and services exported by the United States are bound for Asia, and about 30% of our imports come from the region. More than 1 million Americans serve in jobs supported by our exports to Asia, and that number has risen 50% in just the last decade. We're committed to growing these numbers while making sure the benefits are broadly shared. As a Pacific nation, the United States is working to shape a more dynamic future for the entire region by promoting U.S. businesses and forging new ties of commerce. Asia needs open and transparent economies and regional support for international economic norms if it's to remain a worldwide engine of economic growth. Driving a global economic recovery that creates jobs here in the United States and addresses the kind of trade imbalances that contributed to the economic meltdown in the first place will require hard work on both sides of the Pacific. For the United States, that means boosting our exports and continuing to bring down our budget deficit. For countries in Asia, it means shifting the focus from overseas markets to strengthening their domestic sources of demand. Our foremost economic goal in the region is concluding negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and achieving congressional approval. The 12 nations that are part of the TPP negotiations represent more than 40% of global trade. So the rules we establish through this agreement will set the standard for future trade agreements. It will take on unfair practices by state-owned enterprises and the regulatory barriers goods encounter at and behind borders. This will help level the playing field for everyone. The TPP will promote workers' rights, environmental protections, and build stronger safeguards for intellectual property, improving economic conditions for everyone, not just the few. We welcome any nation that is willing to live up to the high standards of this agreement to join and share the benefits of TPP, and that includes China. The TPP can be the core of a far broader agreement expanding to countries across the Asia-Pacific. To help realize that vision, we're working to negotiate a series of agreements with ASEAN that will put these countries in a better position to join high-standard agreements like the TPP. ASEAN represents a $2.5 billion economic bloc that contains some of the fastest-growing countries in Asia, as well as some of its poorest. Helping these dynamic economies improve their policies on key issues like investment principles will benefit them. It will also foster an even greater trade and investment climate and opportunities for the United States in Southeast Asia. By 2030, India is projected to have the largest population of any country in the world and the third largest economy. During the past decade, the United States and India have developed a valued global partnership, and President Obama aims to make the next decade even more transformative. From the Look East policy to India's contributions to maritime security and its expanding involvement in regional organizations, India has much to offer Asia and the world. Together, our nations launched a new clean energy partnership, mobilizing billions of dollars in public and private investment for solar, wind, and alternative energy projects in India. And our governments have joined with private sector partners in both countries to launch a $2 billion infrastructure debt fund, the first of hopefully many future funds meant to attract financing for Indian infrastructure projects. We look forward to deepening our cooperation across the broad spectrum of our relationship. The United States also seeks to elevate our economic relationship with China in the years ahead. Last week, China's leaders announced plans for sweeping reforms that, if realized, could go a long way towards leveling the playing field for private and foreign investors and moving China's economy towards market principles. That is an opportunity we must seize. But even as we increase trade and pursue a bilateral investment treaty, we will continue insisting on tangible progress in areas that matter to U.S. businesses and workers. These include China continuing to move towards a market-determined exchange rate, increasing U.S. access to Chinese markets, and bolstering protections for U.S. companies' intellectual property rights and trade secrets, especially against state-sponsored cyber theft. Cyber-enabled economic espionage hurts China as well as the United States because American businesses are increasingly concerned about the costs of doing business in China. If meaningful action is not taken now, this behavior will undermine the economic relationship that benefits both our nations. As the world's two largest energy consumers, energy producers, and greenhouse gas emitters, the United States and China also have a duty to lead together to tackle climate change and spur the global transition to a low-carbon energy future. Last June, Presidents Obama and Xi reached an historic agreement to phase out certain potent greenhouse gases. In July, we launched initiatives under the U.S.-China Climate Change Working Group to scale up successful technologies and policies around heavy-duty vehicles, smart grids, carbon capture, and sequestration. Given that Asian economies will be the strongest driver of energy demand in the coming decades, how the region meets its energy needs will have critical implications for global energy supply and climate change. We have a vested interest in shifting the global energy mix to cleaner, low-carbon, and more efficient energy technologies. As we work towards this goal in Asia, we will partner with regional leaders in renewable and clean energy technologies, like India, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, to bring these technologies to market. We're also promoting cleaner burning natural gas, as well as safe and secure nuclear energy to meet the region's rising energy demand with lower carbon alternatives. Another key driver of economic growth, global economic growth and development, is the expansion of women's participation in the workforce throughout the Asia-Pacific. This single change has the potential to do the most good for the greatest number of people. In developed countries like Japan, fuller participation in the workforce by women could increase per capita GDP by as much as 4%. And it's no coincidence that in the Philippines, where they are making strong progress to close the gender gap, they also have one of the fastest growing economies in the region. The World Economic Forum has shown that those two factors are closely correlated. Simply put, the smaller the gender gap, the stronger the economic growth. Strengthening our shared security and promoting our shared prosperity are vital elements of America's commitment to the Asia-Pacific region. So, too, is advancing respect for the rights and the values we hold dear. Since World War II, the United States has played a key role in fostering one of the most significant developments of the past century, the advance of democracy in Asia. In the early years of this new century, we must help consolidate and expand democracy across Asia to enable more and more people to participate fully in the political life of their countries. The rapid change we've seen in Burma in just the past 2 years is a portent of the possible. Not unlike North Korea, Burma was a pariah state ruled by a military junta and responsible for egregious violations of human rights. When President Obama took office, Aung San Suu Kyi was in her 14th year of house arrest, and hundreds of Burmese citizens were imprisoned merely for exercising their right of free speech. Burma's leaders faced enormous economic pressure and intense international isolation until they chose another path. Over the last several years, we've worked closely with both President Thein Sein and Aung San Suu Kyi, and with the government and people of Burma as they've made historic changes. Today, more than 1,000 political prisoners have been released, and we're helping Burma build a credible electoral infrastructure ahead of its 2015 national elections. We're supporting a process of constitutional reform and national reconciliation. As Burma moves towards greater openness and change, we're easing sanctions while encouraging responsible investment and robust support for the people and civil society activists who suffered so long under the iron fist of dictatorship. There's still a great deal of work ahead before Burma fully transitions to democracy. The challenge of overcoming ethnic tensions and violence and of protecting vulnerable minorities like the Rohingya will require persistent vigilance. But if progress continues, by the end of President Obama's second term, we hope to have helped Burma reestablish itself as a regional leader and as a thriving, if nascent, prosperous democracy. Not all countries will achieve progress so dramatically, but the steady work of political reform presses on in nations across the region. The United States will support those working to pry open the doors of democracy even just a little wider, from Cambodia to Fiji. We'll continue to help nations strengthen institutions to uphold justice and the rule of law, to meet the basic needs of their people. Working with the Open Government Partnership and the Community of Democracies will help protect civil society and support its work to shape the region's development. We'll combat the corruption that makes it so difficult for ordinary citizens to run for office, start a business, or even just send their kids to school. And in every region, in every country of the region, we will strive to improve protections for ethnic and religious minorities and help nations see the diversity of their peoples as a source of deep strength. Fidelity to our values will guide us as we pursue closer relations with the countries of the Asia-Pacific, including those with which we differ. We'll continue to champion the freedom to speak one's mind, the ability to access information freely, to practice one's faith without fear, and will speak out when governments trammel or toss aside basic rights and freedoms, which are the birthright of every human being. That brings me to our last set of goals, helping improve the well-being of the region's most vulnerable people, who share the same desire for dignity as all mankind. We want an Asia-Pacific region in which poverty continues to decline. Citizens are healthier, children are educated, and the environment is protected, and women can participate fully and equally in their societies. And we're working in partnership with countries throughout the region to give life to that vision. We know we can fight AIDS, reduce preventable child deaths, and improve food security across the Asia-Pacific, because we've seen real progress in all these areas over the last 5 years. Further progress is possible where countries demonstrate the political will to invest in their own development and step up to do big things together. Our Feed the Future program has helped more than 400,000 rice farmers throughout the region increase their yields through the more efficient use of fertilizer. Through the Partnership for Growth, we're working with the Philippines to strengthen the country's foundations for economic development while improving their ability to mitigate the impact of future disasters. Throughout the Pacific Islands, we're partnering with governments to address development challenges ranging from adapting to rapid population growth to reducing high poverty and unemployment rates. And we're working with Indonesia and others to craft a measurable, ambitious development agenda for the world in 2015 and beyond. With smart, targeted investments, countries in the Asia-Pacific are leading dramatic improvements in development. Across the region, we're partnering with countries to address issues that affect all people, including public health challenges. In an era when someone can step on a plane in Jakarta at breakfast and be in Los Angeles by lunch, we are increasingly focused on the threat posed by global pandemics. At the same time, we continue to support governments and healthcare providers across the region to improve public health. For example, we're working closely with Bangladesh on our joint pledge to end preventable child deaths, and we're collaborating with Indonesia to improve maternal and infant health in rural communities. America has a stake in Asia's children growing up to be productive members of society. That's why we're investing in early childhood education and expanding access to post-secondary school training at universities and vocational institutions all throughout the region. We're working especially closely with ASEAN nations on this goal, establishing several new programs to help young people of Southeast Asia develop new skills and opportunities. And equally, we have an economic as well as a moral stake in elevating women as full partners in every facet of the Asia-Pacific. Therefore, we're helping to prevent and respond to gender-based violence and to combat the scourge of human trafficking. Through the Equal Futures Partnership, we're joining with countries across the region, the World Bank, the United Nations, and others to advance reforms that create more opportunities for women to participate in the political and economic life of their countries. In Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam, we're involving more women in helping their countries better manage natural resources, respond to pandemics, promote educational reform, and improve food security. Finally, we will do more to help sustainable growth by protecting the environment and conserving Asia's natural resources while implementing measures to help communities adapt to the impact of climate change. We're redoubling our efforts to protect threatened wildlife and reduce trafficking in endangered species in cooperation with regional forums like APAC. Our planet, as we all know, is a non-renewable resource that supports some 7 billion people, half of them in the Asia Pacific. We have a duty to those who will inherit this earth to put in place practices that will sustain and improve life for future generations. I'd like to end today by highlighting a place where all of these elements, security, alliances, economic ties, development, institutions, and universal values, have recently come together in a major manifestation of America's commitment to the region. The Philippines is our oldest ally in Asia. Our nations are forever bound by the blood we shed together, the families we built together, and the history we've made together. Last week, a super typhoon slammed into the Philippines, leaving thousands dead and millions more in dire need of assistance. As President Obama said, when our friends are in trouble, America helps. Before the storm, our disaster relief experts from the U.S. Agency for International Development were already on the ground. Pacific Command moved into action. We put hundreds of Marines from Okinawa on the ground in Tacloban almost immediately to help with the search and rescue. Within days, the USS George Washington Strike Group arrived with helicopters, small ships, water purification capacity, medical services and equipment to clear roads and ferry aid to outlying areas. Over the weekend, joining with UNICEF, we were able to help the Philippine government bring Tacloban's municipal water purification and production system back online. It's now providing clean drinking water to more than 275,000 people. We're cooperating seamlessly with our allies in the region, particularly Japan and Australia, who have stepped up to help a neighbor in need. Together, we're working around the clock to manage the immediate crisis and help the Filipino people begin rebuilding their country. Recovery will be a long process, but the United States will stand beside the Philippines every step of the way, getting people back to work, rebuilding homes, reopening schools. Our pledge to the people of the Philippines reflects our broader pledge to the people of the Asia Pacific. America's commitment won't expire a few months or a few years from now. The United States of America will be there, reliable, constant, strong, and steady for the long haul. And together with the people of the Asia Pacific, we will continue to advance the shared security, prosperity, and human dignity that we all cherish. Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Rice, for a comprehensive and visionary statement of U.S. policy and strategy in Asia. It comes at a very important time, so thank you again. If you have just a few minutes and are able to take a couple of questions from our students, I apologize to the audience because given the time constraints, we collected some questions in advance. The first question comes from Drew, who's a first-year master's student in the program, and his question is on China and Japan. And he asks, besides adopting a policy of discouraging military escalation, Is there anything else that the United States can do in regards to the island dispute between China and Japan? To what extent can we serve as a mediator on this issue, or how can we help Sino-Japanese relations in general?
Well, it's a very important question. And indeed, we are very focused on the dispute over the islands. The United States has not and does not take a position on the question of sovereignty. But the fact of the matter is we do have a real stake in avoiding conflict and helping China and Japan avoid any escalation and to find peaceful diplomatic ways to address their dispute. We're encouraging the two sides to open channels that would enable them to avoid the risk of unintended escalation in the event of a misunderstanding or miscommunication. And we are encouraging them to work on this issue with an understanding of the risks involved and the necessity of avoiding any kind of conflict that would be disastrous not only for those two countries, but for the broader region and indeed for the global economy.
The second question is on Korea, and this comes from Sam, who's a senior in the SFS. And he asks, what steps, if any, can the administration take in the remaining years of President Obama's second term to restart the six-party talks? And how do you think the negotiations with Iran could impact the North Korea issue?
Well, let me actually start with Iran and then come back to North Korea. We don't know yet, we'll learn in the next few days, how the current round of talks between the P5+1, the parties negotiating with Iran, and Iran will unfold. The last round yielded significant progress, but not a resolution. The P5+1 remained united, and on the table is what we consider to be a very reasonable and well-crafted first step initiative. That first step would be for a 6-month period to buy time and space for a comprehensive negotiation that could resolve Iran's nuclear problem. The reason to buy that time and space is because without this interim agreement, there will be no break on Iran continuing full steam ahead with its nuclear program while it talks and perhaps drags out talks. This interim step, if agreed, would halt all progress in Iran's nuclear program and roll back its program in some very key respects. It will deal with all aspects of its program: centrifuges, enrichment, the Iraq plutonium processing facility, and it will give the international community unprecedented transparency into all aspects of the Iranian nuclear program. Now, whether that comes to pass or not, obviously, remains to be seen. But if it were to, that would be a good first step for the United States, because it would enable us to test the prospects of a peaceful resolution, which is what we've sought through the application of very tough sanctions. And at the same time, it would give the international community greater insight into the nature of this program while halting its progress and rolling it back. So if such an agreement were reached, now turning to North Korea, what important lessons or applications does that have for North Korea? Well, first of all, if that agreement is reached, it will have been a product, in large part, of the concerted pressure that the members of the international community had applied, particularly through broad, sweeping economic sanctions. It'll be the product of cooperative effort over years between the United States, France, Britain, Russia, China, and Germany. Not a dissimilar configuration, in part, to the six-party configuration. And the fact that the P5+1 have hung together and negotiated from a position of strength with the backing of the Security Council and international sanctions may have, if this succeeds, created an opening. But in the case of North Korea, we have had similar unity and economic pressure, And indeed, China and the United States, along with the other members of the Six Party, have stepped up increasingly the pressure on North Korea. North Korea has not yet taken a decision, partly perhaps because it begins from such a lower economic base, and is far less open, in fact, to the international community than is Iran, to realize that it's in its best interest to come to the negotiating table in earnest. We're no more interested in talking for talking's sake with North Korea than we would be with Iran. It's got to be, given the past history of North Korea's talking while enriching and pursuing its nuclear and missile programs, a serious engagement if we're to do this again. North Korea knows exactly what it needs to do to demonstrate that it's serious, including by starting by implementing the agreements that it's previously reached and broken. And so we remain, as I said in my remarks, open to the resumption of negotiations. We certainly are open and have had bilateral channels for communication with North Korea. But North Korea has to make the fundamental choice that it is serious about denuclearization. The six parties, the 5 countries in the 6 parties, the members of the Security Council, Russia, China, the United States, plus Japan and the Republic of Korea, have been very clear about what is necessary. And we'll see if North Korea chooses to take that opportunity, as I said, which can lead in the context of denuclearization to a different relationship with the world, the end of economic isolation, or it can continue on the path it's on, in which case the pressure will mount and circumstances will get much worse.
And the last question is from Yining, who's a first-year master's student. And Yining asks, I'm very interested to know what Dr. Rice's take is on the newly established Chinese State Security Committee. Suppose this committee had the primary mission like our NSC, and Dr. Rice were to meet her new Chinese counterpart. What would she say to him or her?
Ni hao ma. I think we need to wait and see exactly the nature of the responsibilities that this new State Security Council will have, and the nature of its leadership. It's certainly an interesting potential development, and obviously if I have a formal Chinese counterpart, the equivalent of a national security advisor, I will look forward to working with him. I suspect maybe not a her, to work on the panoply of issues that we do every day with China. But I want to mention that in the absence of that structure, we still have very regular and open channels with Chinese counterparts, with State Councilor Yang, with the foreign minister, with many of those closest to the leadership who work on core national security and foreign policy issues. But it would be nice if there were a structure that would accelerate and coordinate Chinese foreign policy and national security decision-making and facilitate the kind of collaboration and deconfliction that we enjoy here most days in the United States. Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate your attention.